So we're back on in session, and we're moving on to item number 11, and that would be Jennifer's registered veterinary technician report. So the floor is yours, Jennifer.
All right. So I agree that I feel this has been the longest year ever in the history of years, and it's only July. So I'll make this as short as I can. Just so that we don't forget the issue of fees. I know that it was brought up at the MDC meeting. They are exploring the idea of other ways to lower RVT fees and change other fees. So I just want to make sure that we know that that's not being ignored. We are still addressing the issue of RVT license fees. And I did see in the reports today that there were over 400 new RVT applications and over 430 VACSP applications. And the current population was listed as we have 15,000 veterinarians licensed in California, and we have 9,600 RVTs and 7,000 VACSP. So we actually have 16,000 non-DVM RVT and VACSP. So I just want to say the numbers look like they're going up. So I'm really happy that our profession is growing. The issue of foreign graduate RVTs that was brought up yesterday and again today. And honestly, because of the pandemic, I don't have any updates on the AAVSB PAVE program. The last meeting that I was aware of was in December. They were having some quarterly meetings, and then the world just went crazy. But I did hear from CARVTA's Nancy Ehrlich today that she gave us some other options. Section 4841(5)B, she had mentioned that the board actually has the ability to review equivalency in education, I guess. So that's something that we might want to explore. The veterinary nurse initiative, which I think kind of goes along with title protection, those are still some hot topics in the RVT world. So I don't have any updates on the veterinary nurse initiative. The last thing I had heard was in February, and I forget which state it was, had passed it, but another state had not. So I know California was in the last section to be presented, but remember that in the RVT world, title protection is still very important. I do know that there are a lot of veterinary assistants who call themselves veterinary technicians, so let's not forget about that. Another thing was something that this is the first I have heard of it, but extending the scope of practice for RVTs, I guess that's something that the AAVSB had actually some language on for some other states, and I hadn't heard of it until it was brought up to me the other day. So I would like to ask at the end of my report if CARVTA might have heard of it, but actually Dr. Nunez was the one who brought it up to me. And I don't know if we had any updates on the VTNE pass rates. I didn't see that in our reports today. And if we had any updates on the RVT application processing times, I know that those were some issues that had been brought up previously. So I'm hoping that those will be covered in our reports later today. And then also the last thing that I have is I have noticed such an increase in attendance while we've been having these webcast meetings. When I was going through the minutes, there were pages and pages of guest names who were attending. So I know with the pandemic right now, we really don't have any other option than to meet virtually, but I'd like to explore the possibility of continuing this. I know personally it's very difficult for me to take time off of work and travel, and especially with the MDC and the VMB, it's 3 days for me and traveling the day before. And I just think we'd get a lot more attendance. Not everybody is able to take time off of work to attend these meetings. I know they do move all over California, but just the increase in attendance. Yes, we've had some very hot topics that people have wanted to talk about, but I really think that we could get more attendance if they did have the option to attend virtually. So that's what I have. I'm open for questions.
Mark, your hand is up. You're also muted, Mark, so we didn't hear anything.
I put my hand down and then I will answer Jennifer's questions about civil practice in the next report.
Okay, that's probably a great segue. Thank you, Jennifer, for your report, and I'll turn the floor over to Kathy and to Mark for agenda item number 12.
Can we ask for public comment on that item first, please?
Oh, I'm sorry, absolutely. We didn't ask for public comment on my item either. Do you want to open it for agenda items 10 and 11?
Sure.
Okay, so moderator, if you would, could we open up for public comment for items 10 and 11 on the agenda?
Certainly. At the direction of the board, I have opened the Q&A panel. If you would like to submit a request to make a public comment, please type, "I would like to make a comment" in the ask field at the lower right of your screen, and please send to all panelists. Once your request has been received, it will be addressed in the order it is taken, and I will pause a moment to allow you to access and submit your request. We do have a request for public comment. An individual identified as Anita Levy-Hudson. Your microphone is unmuted.
Wonderful, thank you. I wanted to state about the nature of the virtual meetings, or I guess in response to that report. I think it's great that we're having increased participation, with this method. I wanted to ask, is there any kind of information that you could further discuss or release with the numbers of participants that we're seeing this way versus what we've kind of been seeing in person? The in-person meetings, we often go around and introduce ourselves and say who we are. I am just wondering about that kind of information.
So that information is accessible through our meeting minutes. You can see from prior meetings that we have, they're all listed there. So you can see the huge jump for the recent meeting minutes compared to the last one.
No additional requests have been submitted. Would you like me to close this feature?
Yes, please.
Q&A panel has been closed.
And I would just add to Anita's comment that we don't have any statistics for you, but I think we're all impressed with just by being here that there has been an increase in participation, which is welcomed. Okay, Mark and Kathy, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Okay, Mark, do you want me? I'll start with the ICVA. And
Okay.
Mark is going to cover we're both on this task force with the AAVSB. So it's going to cover that one. So ICVA, it's not a lot new. The board meeting, which was going to take place in June, got postponed to August, and it's going to now take place via Zoom, August 28th and 29th, as well as, I would say, and I think we said this before, the AAVSB conference, the annual conference has been canceled this year too. In person, I think they are going to still do the CE, and they're going to do some virtual training work, but obviously the in-person conference is canceled. As far as ICVA is concerned, because of all the NAVLE test takers and the poor students that are trying to finish school and schedule the tests and everything else, we have postponed or elongated the spring testing window. Typically it's April for 2 weeks. Then we postponed it through till June, and now we postponed it. Now it goes through September, and then the fall test taking, which is typically November. It's a month, usually middle of November to middle of December. Now it's starting September 30th or September 1st possibly, and going through the end of the year. And again, trying to accommodate as many people throughout the world as possible as these centers are opening up and closing up and everything else due to the COVID situation. The other thing that ICVA has done. They've been staff have been pretty remarkable, and I have to commend them in all their work in terms of being nimble and working with the students and the colleges and everything else on all the requirements. Is they have there's self-assessment tests that you can purchase as a student. And there was one that was about to be retired, and ICVA board determined that we would provide it for free to students. It's not super expensive anyway. I think it's $50 or $60 to buy the test. But, in this time and with all the other issues, this just helped. We were hoping to allay a little bit of the costs for some of these students. And lastly, let me think here. The other thing is, and I'll address it when we get to our report on exams. I think there's a little bit of skewed numbers in the NAVLE exams, so when we get to it, because they are releasing the scores monthly, and I think the numbers look strange. For instance, an 83% passing, and it's just only because the scores are getting released to all the jurisdictions on a monthly basis, because the window hasn't really even closed yet. So that's it for ICVA. I'm on a governance board standing committee right now for the ICVA, reviewing the board, its governance, and how to improve it. And that's one other thing I'm doing with them. So I'll have a better report for our October meeting, but that's basically it.
Really quickly, a quick comment on all our WebEx meetings that we've been having. When I was preparing for this meeting, I'll look back at notes on previous meetings, and they only archive our voices, so our little webcams are not archived. So even though I make it a point to make sure my background looks perfect, that's not archived, and I'm a little disappointed about that. But on to my report. I was recently appointed to the Programs and Service Think Tank Ad Hoc Committee at the AAVSB, and the purpose of that committee is just to review existing and proposed programs that are provided by the AAVSB and the ICVA to member boards. So there's just lots of surveys that are sent out to try to get an idea of what the member boards need and so forth. So we're not talking about specific regulations or proposals or programs. We're just doing a lot of daydreaming, I think. And so if there was some useful projects that they were doing, they recently sent out a survey to find out how many boards are doing newsletters. And, that would apply to some of our strategic goals of outreach. 32 boards responded to that survey. 11 boards publish a newsletter. 21 don't. So most of the boards are not doing newsletters. It varies in frequency from 4 times a year to every 2 years. Target audience is usually licensees, but some of them target the public as well. And the California VMB responded that we are intending on launching an online newsletter this year. The next topic was the veterinary technologist need assessment. And what they did here was, everyone's familiar with the veterinary technician job analysis survey that goes out, I think, every 4 or 5 years. That basically asks what all the technicians are doing during the course of their day, what skills are needed to do that job task, and they use all that information to formulate the exams. They took that survey and asked veterinary technologists to do the same survey. So they're trying to find out if there's a difference between veterinary technicians, what they're doing on the job, and what veterinary technologists are doing on the job. And again, the veterinary technologist is one who has a bachelor's degree in veterinary technology. And they applied all the bells and whistles that they do to these surveys. And the bottom line is they found that there was not much difference between the tasks performed by the veterinary technician and the veterinary technologist. And then for some reason, they used that as a springboard to ask the question whether or not the AAVSP wants to support a veterinary technologist master's degree program that would be even more education for educational opportunities for veterinary technologists. Perhaps get a little bit more specialized in what it is that they do. That was asked in light of the question of expanding the scope of practice of veterinary technicians. And so that's why that was brought up. The questions that obviously came up were there would have to be changes in regulation. If you are making a program available for an RVT to go through even more education and get potentially into more student debt, then there should be some sort of expansion of duties they would be able to do, and therefore an expansion of salary. They didn't do any economic analysis on whether or not this is something that the veterinary profession would support, but that was all that discussion. No conclusion was reached as far as what the next step would be, but that's the discussion we had. They talked about corporate ownership of veterinary practices. I mean, once again, that California is usually at the forefront of issues. And so we just told them all the things we discussed. We were forming our legislation. And then finally, they just had, AAVSP has a pretty impressive list of COVID-related referral information on what everyone across the country and Canada is doing about it. So it was just a lot of daydreaming. It was interesting. And in addition to the annual meeting being canceled, the elections were also canceled, if everyone doesn't know. So last year, I was nominated to serve on the board of directors of the AAVSP. I didn't win that election. I think it was because of Russian interference. But I reapplied again this year, or you guys nominated me again this year, and that election is canceled. So maybe next year. That's it.
You can't pull a break on this one, Mark. What the heck? Any questions for Kathy or for Mark? I don't see any. Let's go ahead and have the moderator open this up for any public comments or questions.
The Q&A panel has been open. If you would like to make a comment, please type "I would like to make a comment" in the Ask field and send it to all panelists. I will take comments in the order they are received. I will now pause a moment to allow for access and submission. No requests have been submitted. Would you like me to close this feature?
Yes, please.
Q&A panel has been closed.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and move on now to item number update and discussion on Office of Attorney General costs and process improvements.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, there's some feedback, so make sure everyone has their muted.
Carl, does your video work?
It should. Let me turn it on here. I thought it was activated. There we go. All righty. Thank you very much, Executive Officer Sieberman and members of the board. My name is Carl Sani. I was appointed as the Senior Assistant Attorney General for the licensing section in November of last year. I'm responsible for the supervision of about 135 deputy attorneys general and paralegals who work on matters from time to time for the Veterinary Medical Board. I succeed Linda Schneider, who some of you may have met in previous meetings. Switch slides here. So today, what I would like to do is give you a presentation regarding the statistics and metrics that our office has performed in the licensing section for all Department of Consumer Affairs agencies, and then drill down to the Veterinary Medical Board after I give you a quick overview of what it is that we do. The work that I'm going to be reviewing with you today is contained in a report that the licensing section, the Attorney General's office, publishes every January that contains metrics for the handling by our office of accusation matters. Let's switch slides here. So earlier in the afternoon, I heard you reviewing your regulations, and one of the regulations covered the Consumer Protection Enforcement Initiative that was passed several years ago in order to expedite the handling of cases, accusation matters, and to basically identify how long cases take to go through the administrative process and to report to the public and to the Veterinary Medical Board the specific timelines that govern our work. So that work that requires this report was passed in 2015, SB 467, and the reporting requirement became effective in January of 2016. The first actual report, though, was prepared in 2018, or the year of 2017 to 18. We've now had, with the third annual report, we have 3 years of data, but for the first year, we coordinated our work with the Health Quality Enforcement section that does work involving doctors and psychologists and such. And we streamlined and combined the methodology. So the methodology that we employ is really about 2 years old now. So we really look at the second and third report data. Let's go to the next slide. So in gathering the data, we use what's called our Prolog case management system. And about 4 or 5 years ago, we developed a set of data points in cases that we actually document in an electronic case file that identify, for example, when a case is referred to us, the date the case is filed, the date that the hearing is set, the date when the hearing is actually submitted, and finally the date of resolution. We have about 200 users of this system, about 135 in our section, and about another 80 or so in health quality enforcement. So all of that data is gathered, and we're talking about maybe 4,000 cases a year just involving accusation matters for all of our clients. That data then is analyzed by paralegals. It is put into a database from which we can derive a variety of metrics for each of our client agencies and for all of our work as a whole. Let's go to the next slide. So looking at the entire work of the licensing section, you can see here for these last 2 years, which are really the only years we're looking at nowadays, we see a decrease in referrals, a slight increase in rejected matters, further investigations about the same, and actually the adjudications increased. One of the points I'm going to try to make today is when you're looking at 2 data points, 1 year and then the next year, it is very difficult and probably not a good practice to try to derive conclusions. What we really hope is that over a period of years, we will be able to identify trends. One reason why comparing 2 years is difficult and a little bit dangerous is the metrics are measured from July 1st of 1 year to June 30th of the following year. Well, cases are not neatly referred to our office based on what month of the year they come in. So we can have a case that comes in 1 year, but it is filed in the next year. And so those data points are going to be separated. So it's really, you have to be very careful about comparing years to years. Let's go to the next slide. Now, this is the data that pertains specifically to the Veterinary Medical Board. So the indication here is that accusations referred to our office actually decreased from the 2017, 2018 year by almost 40%. But again, one of the reasons why that is, you have to be very cautious, is because of the fact that this is comparing two data points that cross over in the middle of the year. One thing we do know that the Veterinary Medical Board has been very diligent on is improving the quality of the cases and the documentation that comes to us when we get cases. So that makes it more effective, and it allows for kind of a winnowing process to only get us cases that are ready to go, basically. And that's what we're looking to see, and the Veterinary Medical Board has been very responsive to these issues in devising ways to develop and package cases more efficiently, and learning exactly what it is that the Attorney General's office wants to see in these cases. This also indicates matters rejected. Again, when you're dealing with a difference between 0 and 3, it's really not meaningful. Cases are sometimes rejected in our office for reasons as innocuous as the fact that licensees often pass away during the course of investigations and prosecutions. I've handled more than one of those cases myself, in which case our office looks at it and says that this matter ought to be withdrawn or rejected if it hasn't been filed yet. Let's go to the next slide. Here we see that the further investigations requested has been basically the same over these 2-year periods. Further investigations received from 6 to 3. Again, it's probably not meaningful to compare those 2 dates when you're only dealing with a difference of maybe 3 cases. Let's go to the next slide. Again, here we see a decrease in the number of accusations filed. And again, as I indicated before, our staff has worked closely with the staff of the Veterinary Medical Board in basically identifying information that we need in order to file cases. And they have done a lot of actions in identifying upfront mitigation evidence that a licensee may present to the board. And based on that, they may determine that it is not necessary to file an accusation. Perhaps in lieu of an accusation, they may issue a citation. So I actually view that difference as a healthy sign that the board is carefully monitoring the cases that it refers over to our office. Go to the next slide, please. Now, in this case, we have accusations withdrawn. Again, 4 cases out of this number of cases is really not meaningful. If, for example, to use the example I used before, a licensee passes away in the middle of a case, it would be rejected if we haven't filed an accusation yet. If, in fact, an accusation is filed and the person passes away, and I've seen both of these cases, then that matter may be withdrawn. In addition to which, often we're receiving mitigation evidence from the licensee during this whole investigative process, and which may come even after an accusation is filed. And based on that determination that there is significant mitigation evidence, the board may appropriately look at that evidence and avoid going to hearing on it and resolving the matter, again, through a citation, or in the interest of justice, withdrawing the accusation entirely. You see matters adjudicated increased by 50%. Again, while that looks good, I would not read too much into it. That means that we were working the cases and they were from one year to another. We happened to complete a lot of cases in that year. It's not too telling a statistic. Going to the next slide, please. Again, here, the decrease in the accusation file time is likely a result, in my opinion, to the tighter communication that exists now between the Attorney General's office and the Veterinary Medical Board. When I say that tighter communication, we have actually a supervisor, one of our more senior deputies, acts as the liaison to the Veterinary Medical Board and is in regular and close contact with the board in order to maximize the free flow of information in determining what cases should be filed, whether we need supplemental investigation, and or necessarily even resolving the cases soon. You see an increase in accusations filed after further investigation, one that goes to 658 days. The numbers after the days reflects the number of cases that are involved in reaching that statistic. So with respect to 2018 and 19, you see 658 days, which again is a very long time. But oftentimes what is happening is there could be further complaints that are being raised, and the matter is then looking at a potential amendment of accusations. But given the fact that that is a single case, that itself is not significant. And boards typically have major matters where they are receiving supplemental information as the case proceeds, which requires further time and further investigation, which is quite appropriate and necessary. Let's go now to the next slide. Here, I would point your attention to the accusation filed from the timeline from days to default. Between these 2 days, there was a major increase from 79 days to 123 days. But again, you see that only 2 cases were involved in that metric. And so the statistical significance, the statistical significance or the materiality of those 2 cases is really questionable, and no conclusions should be drawn. Let's go again now to the next slide. Now, one of the statistics I can comment on is the hearing date received to hearing commenced. And there you saw a significant decrease of 317 days down to 183 days. And one thing I can tell you is that many more administrative law judges have been hired in the last 2 or 3 years. One of the biggest impediments we've had historically is a limited number of judges to hear our matters. So it might take us from the time we file an accusation to get to hearing. When I started 13 years ago, it would take 1 to 2 years before you could get a hearing date on a matter after you filed the accusation. Steady improvement has been made. The legislature has funded those additional ALJ positions, and that has had a dramatic increase in the efficiency of the work of prosecuting these accusations. Let's go to the final slide here, the conclusions. So one of our big messages here, and the message that the legislature is telling us, is by maintaining these metrics, by watching them, by keeping track and publishing them, we believe that we will be able to see trends over time. My estimation is it will probably take about 5 years to really identify trends from which we can draw a lot of conclusions. The Consumer Protection Enforcement Initiative has a goal of reducing time from 36 months down to 18 months, the time of a complaint to adjudication. That's a very, very challenging goal, but it's one that the board is working hard on and our office is working hard on, and we believe we've been seeing significant progress. Again, our experience with the Veterinary Medical Board has been that the board's enforcement program as it exists now is very robust. It carefully considers all of its cases. It investigates cases even more thoroughly than before, and that has really facilitated the work of the Attorney General's office. So we've been really pleased with that interaction between our office and the Veterinary Medical Board, and we believe that that relationship will see even additional results over the next few years. That concludes my kind of overview of our metrics, and I thought I would take any questions that you might have that pertain to these these numbers.
Well, thank you, Carl, very much for being here. We really appreciate it, and for all of this information. It's been very helpful. I had one question. It was just a few slides ago. Were looking at some time from accusation filed to the requested, and you didn't make a specific mention of that. But could you comment on those?
Well, that case is likely. Let's see. You're talking about the accusations filed, hearing requested.
Right. It was about 11 cases. It appears that there was a significant increase in time, it looked like.
Yeah, and those are 11 cases, and I honestly haven't looked at those cases. I think if you looked at these statistics generally for our agencies, that has not been an area of much concern. I would have to examine these 11 cases. There are oftentimes a lot of reasons that can impact these. For example, if you have an accusation that is filed, but you have a complex case that requires additional investigation and documentation, that can spread it out. Does that mean that the work is not being done efficiently or effectively? No. It just means that this case may be a more complicated case. I personally handled a matter that was resolved shortly before I was promoted that involved 1 million pages of 900,000 pages of documentation. We spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on the case. We were victorious, but it took about 3.5 years, and we only requested the hearing very late in the day. And one of the reasons why the hearing got delayed was the other side kept asking for continuances as well. They would subpoena documents from third parties. So a lot of things can impact the reason why the hearing date can be delayed. And I would not be prepared, I think, just to comment and mislead you without really looking at those 11 cases. But those are the types of dynamics that we see come into play in this process.
And is it possible that one or two of those cases could be adding most of the time? Is that what you're trying to say?
Yes.
Okay.
I know personally from my experience with another board, my case altered the statistics, but it wasn't because everyone was oblivious, or it wasn't because the case was not being worked very hard. It was worked harder than any other case that I worked on in the last 13 years. It just required a lot more time and effort. If you have 2 or 3 cases like that, it really skews the numbers.
Well, thank you very much. I have a few hands up. I have Mark and Jessica.
Yeah, it's encouraging to hear that the time of this whole process is going to be improved with the addition of the judges. So that's good news. Another frustrating thing is cost. Oftentimes, when we get final judgments, come up with the final cost of prosecuting, and the judge says it shouldn't have cost that much, and cuts it down, and we take a hit. So can you comment on any ways that the cost of prosecution can be reduced?
Let me phrase it this way. There is a case called the Zuckerman case. And what the Zuckerman case says is that you have to look at a variety of factors in determining what costs are properly chargeable to the licensee. So if you spend a lot of money on a given case, but the licensee has very few resources, the court is allowed to hear the financial position of the licensee and make a determination whether or not those costs should be reduced. And that's not uncommon at all. Each of the agencies within the Department of Consumer Affairs has as its motto, if you will, where it places consumer protection as the primary and sole driver in the enforcement, protection of the public. And oftentimes, protection of the public can cost more than what you can recoup at the back end. In this large case that I handled, we ended up covering several $100,000 in the final resolution. Actually got paid on that. But that was a worrisome case, because had it gone to hearing, it settled literally the day before the hearing. Had they taken a writ of mandate, the process could have been strung out for years. And so there's a judgment here. We obtained all the results that the client had hoped, and we were fortunate to get substantially mostly repaid. But what drove the client in that case, as I think drives the Veterinary Medical Board in its cases, is protection of the public, protection of animals.
But
And
they all have been attributed to Zuckerman cases. Some of them have used terms such as duplicative in investigative charges.
yeah, so I think I understand the question. So you're saying that a judge might reduce it because of,
I mean, not necessarily because of Zuckerman, but it just shouldn't have to. Some of the investigations done are duplicative. You have two different lawyers working on the case, or two different DAs, just repeating the process that one of them already did, because it was handed over to a new DA.
well, I can't comment, I can't comment on the specific cases you may be thinking of. We generally have a process whereby a deputy who gets a case sees it all the way through, but sometimes we have deputies who retire or leave the section, and that requires a transition of cases. So there may be occasions when a new person has to come in and learn the case. It's not a common occurrence. Usually the reductions that I remember seeing in costs are more attributable to the financial position of the licensee. And judges are very sympathetic, and they recognize that the board has to spend what it has to spend in order to get the results of public protection. But that may not always be enough, that they feel comfortable imposing on a licensee. But it's a business decision, if you will, of weighing public protection against cost recovery. And the agencies that I've seen put public protection as the number one consideration. But we've been pretty successful in getting cost recovery, but certainly not in all cases.
Jessica, and then Kathy.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment to the 11 cases, Dr. Nolan, that you had asked Carl about. I also don't have those cases in front of me. But Carl is absolutely right. When it comes to a lot of our cases, if we do file the initial accusation, oftentimes we get complaints after that. And so it kind of becomes sort of a juggling game to see, okay, do we need to include these new allegations into the new accusation? And if so, we need to expedite those investigations and try to include it into the accusation or amend the accusation. There's a lot of cases like that we're dealing with right now. So it's not that we're not actively working those cases, we're trying to determine whether or not we need to include the new allegations into the existing accusation. And it just becomes a balancing act, because at some point we're just going to have to keep moving forward because complaints will continue to come in against some of the respondents. Another thing that one of the changes that we've made is oftentimes what we found with, you say, for example, we have a case, we'll have like maybe 10 cases against one respondent. In the past, maybe the board has filed an accusation against one person, against that respondent, but that case was actually the middle case and not the 5 oldest cases and then the 4 cases after that. It was, I think the thought was it was easier to get that one case. But what we found is that then that makes it more difficult to take action on the cases prior to that, because the argument is, well, the board knew about it and decided not to take any action on it. And so we changed that process. We have combined all those cases into one, and we have one analyst handling all of those cases. So everybody is aware of what's going on with that case. But there's a lot of reasons that would make that timeline a lot longer. But I do know that the improvements that the enforcement team has done in working with Karen, our DAG liaison, I think everything that we're streamlining, it will result in cost savings. And also one thing to keep in mind when you see those cost recoveries and the reduction in costs that we find in our cases from the ALJ, The AG's cost is only not small, I don't want to say small, but it's a portion of the cost recovery. It also includes DMI, and it also includes a subject matter expert. And so there's a lot of other components to cost recovery, not just the Attorney General's office.
And I'll respond to that, Jessica. I'm sure it's being caught between a rock and a hard place when you have 10 allegations and they just keep coming in and you're thinking this person is still practicing and I can't stop them. And yet it keeps delaying the process as you pile on accusations, that's frustrating, I'm sure. Okay, I think Kathy's next.
Hi, thank you very much for coming and thank you for this presentation. And like you say, it will be more interesting in the next couple of years as more data is collected and you can see a real pattern there. I have a question. A lot of times in the past, and I appreciate the fact that in the last year at least our board staff under Jessica and the team have changed the way they package up cases and to produce to the AG's office and add the mitigation and do things like that so that there isn't as much back and forth. And that really, I'm thinking, is helping us in terms of timing and on costs. But one of the other factors in the time delays and additional cost was, and you alluded to it slightly earlier, was turnover or repositioning of the DAGs in the AG's office, and one person having it, going off to being transferred, and then someone else learning. Is that better in the AG's office in terms of continuity of staff? I know it's a constant probably problem, but I do know that it has affected a number of our cases just that we've seen just because of a new person having to come in and learn the situation.
I would say that it happens, but it's not as common as you might think. But we have, for example, I think we have 3 or 4 deputies who are coming on in this month and next month, and those people will get assigned cases. The cases that the Veterinary Medical Board have tend to be more sophisticated cases that get to our more senior attorneys, and they're challenging cases because of the medical component to the information. And if in fact we determine, or the deputy determines that another deputy just recently handled a case just like that, and where you might see a transition and a duplication of some sources, it might be that the second attorney is better qualified based on their recent experience to handle that type of case. So there's just a lot of dynamics that go into the issue, but I would venture to say that it is a small minority of cases that change hands. I don't have that number handy, but I know from my personal experience, if you resolve 50 cases a year, maybe 5 of them I may have got from another attorney for one reason or another. We also have sometimes attorneys that get tied up in a lengthy trial, and because of the calendar situation, we have to transfer it. But in general, I would say that that's not common. So I'd be happy to meet with your executive officer and identify those situations and see if it was just an aberration, but it's not something that I commonly see, nor something that the client agencies tell me. So I'm curious myself as to where that perception came from.
Rob has his hand up. Rob, you want to jump in?
Sure. I was actually going to kind of go towards Dr. Nunez's point about cost recovery, because one of the things that we try to do with the constant communication with the assigned DAG to a case is stress the importance and actually our fund condition and what we're looking at. And I think when we can actually get into a stipulated settlement, that's not an area where we want to waver on. And I think when we are talking settlement terms, I know that when I'm dealing with the DAG, I'm trying to tell them, okay, maybe we can flex on a couple of other areas if we need to try and reach an agreement. Obviously, it's a benefit to all parties if we can expedite consumer protection. But cost recovery is one of those areas where we want to try and get as close to our cost recovery, our total as possible. And that, involves just saying, okay, well, we can, like I said, kind of massage over here. We can put them on a payment plan, but whatever we can do to try and recoup all of our costs. And obviously, the additional benefit of settling is that we don't have to take it to hearing after and incur those really, really high costs. Really high costs. But there are times where we do have to take it to hearing based on what they want to settle for and based on our inability to do so.
One thing I have noticed that has impressed me about the enforcement staff is we are seeing more and more cases that come to us with settlement terms already in them. And when we get settlement terms right up front, that allows the deputy to immediately start negotiating with the other side. And for many cases, and probably the less complex cases, that can result in a quick resolution. One thing we talked about earlier was the time frame between the time when a case is filed and when we request a hearing date. One thing we found out about 3 years ago was that if we pressed for scheduling of a hearing date immediately after filing an accusation, for example, oftentimes a respondent will basically say, okay, I don't have to worry about this for another 8 months. And nothing happens. We incur a lot of time and expense in preparing the case for hearing, and then the case settles on the eve of hearing. Well, when a client agency such as the Veterinary Medical Board sends us settlement terms, we have encouraged our deputies with the encouragement of the staff to engage in settlement negotiations early on. And then we say, if we can't resolve this, don't expect that you're going to get a better deal down the road by delay. And so we have had that as a successful and an appropriate tool to try to resolve cases early on. Then if the agency has to spend more time and it can't settle the case, it knows it has done what it can do to foster that early settlement. And then if it has to invest the time, it invests the time. But that has been a very successful technique that the Veterinary Medical Board and a few other agencies have used in recent years, and it is highly effective.
Christina, thank you for waiting.
Of course. Thank you for your presentation. It was actually really helpful to see kind of the different metrics, and I do think it's helpful to, over time we'll really get a better feel of things. And I was really encouraged to hear that what Jessica and her team and Rob are doing has been helping your side of things and making things more efficient and cost effective, it sounds like. I wanted to just ask a couple of questions. One is, if we were to present you with more cases, do you guys have the capacity to handle more right now, or are you also because I know we're kind of stretched thin. I don't know if your department is stretched thin or not.
No, we are actually very well positioned right now. We have capacity.
Okay.
We received some recent hire approvals, and so we are close to being fully staffed. So we're actually in an excellent position to take more work on. And as someone who was once in private practice many years ago, I would say we always welcome new cases. But what really drives it is public protection. And we want to serve you at whatever levels you believe are appropriate to maximize public protection. And we're here for you, and we will ensure that cases get properly staffed and get attended to and hopefully resolved swiftly.
Great. I wanted to make one comment, and then I had a final question. I just wanted to let you know, at least in my opinion, and I don't know her name, but I'm sure we can get that to you. I think that the DAG who's been helping on the cases, the last few cases that we looked at, has just done a really nice job of balancing both, being the prosecutor per se, but also being sensitive to some of the defendants in the cases, and how she handled that was like, it didn't seem as confrontational, and I really appreciated her approach, and I felt like she did a really good job. And I wish I could remember her name off the top of my head, but I wanted you to know that.
That was Anahita Crawford.
Oh,
Okay.
Anahita, yes.
Yeah, it was really nice.
She's an exceptional attorney.
She just did a really nice job, and I felt like I wanted to tell you that. And then the final thing, is there anything that we can do? I know that Jessica and Rob are working really hard to make it easier for you guys, but is there anything else that we might be able to do to improve it even more?
You know, I've been really pleased by everything I've been hearing from our liaison, Karen Denver. And I think she and your staff, Rob, and so on, have been in close communication. There's nothing that I can think of that I would recommend that you are not already doing. And it's all a process of just sort of letting this process move forward and hopefully seeing the results as time passes. But I've been really pleased with the information I heard. It's not, maybe I shouldn't say this, but it was certainly a tribute to Karen Denver and the work that she's done that does impact the fact that she's doing what she's doing today. I mean, you are one of our most important boards. I mean, all clients are important, but you have some very difficult, challenging cases. And it's just a pleasure to interact with the enthusiasm, both with your staff and our deputies. And, you know, this is not a board that registers any concern with me whatsoever. Again, we've been really impressed.
Thank you so much.
I think that's all of the questions that we had for you, Carl. I really, again, would reiterate, we appreciate your time and that you came before us, and we really are looking forward to continue to work with you closely and do the best we can for our consumers. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dr. Nolan, can we open up to public comment to see if they have any questions for Carl or any comments on the presentation?
Sure, I'll have the moderator do that right now.
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I have opened the Q&A panel. If you would like to make a comment, please type "I would like to make a comment" in the ask field and send it to all panelists. Once your request is submitted, I will take it in the order it has been received. I will now pause a moment to allow participants to access the Q&A panel and submit their requests. This is the moderator. We have received no requests. Would you like me to close this feature?
Yes, please.
The Q&A panel has been closed.
Thank you very much for your time this afternoon.
Yeah, thank you again. Okay, we'll go ahead and now move on to agenda item number 14, executive management reports. I'll turn the floor back over to Jessica.
I'm actually going to put this over to Tim Rada. He's going to give the administration, examination, and licensing reports.
Yep. Hello, everybody. How are you doing? It's good to see you, kind of for the first time. I first met everybody in January when I started, so it's good to see and be a part of the board. We're going to start with the expenditure report. Can we pull that up, or do I need to share my screen?
Yeah, you'll need to share your screen.
Let's see. Share this. Oops. Okay. And I hope you can see my screen okay. Good.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm only going to talk briefly about this because we have Bikram from our budget office here who will be presenting as well. But attached at the bottom of our list here are the expenditure reports and projections for the board for the next upcoming couple of years. Something I do want to point out is in inspection area, we do have known costs for inspections for the upcoming 2 years because those are fixed and already planned for and accounted for in our budgets. But I believe Bikram will be able to speak more to the board's fund condition. Is he available now?
While we're getting Bikram online, I just wanted to clarify, when he says inspections, I think Tim just meant investigations through Division of Investigations, not our inspection program.
Sorry, yes.
This is the moderator. Bikram has been promoted to panelist. He is on mute.
Can you unmute him?
Good afternoon. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bikram Dhaliwal. I'm the budget analyst from the DCA budget office. Unfortunately, I don't have a webcam, but I will try my best to just kind of walk you guys through this memo that thankfully Tim put together. And it kind of outlines everything I'm already going to speak about. So it's perfect. And I guess I can start things off by going over the expenditure projections, which are the first attachment in out of the three, right there. Yep. And so these are FM11 expenditure projections, which means that they go through fiscal month 11, which is May. These are the most recent numbers we have. And as Tim has mentioned in the memo, currently we are projecting the board to revert 8.8% of its budget, which translates into $496,000 and $296,000 or $296. So almost $500,000 and almost 9% reversion, which is quite significant and overall very good news for the board. And if you want to kind of look through some of the numbers, or I could just explain them. Most of these savings are due to the fact that Attorney General fees and expenses weren't as high as appropriated. So there's quite a lot of savings there that we're expecting. And then additionally, as mentioned in the memo, even in-state travel costs were significantly lower than budgeted, as well as personnel services. And those are usually due to vacancies. So basically salary, wages, and staff benefits. There's a lot of reversion in those categories. So overall, like I mentioned, it's an 8.8% surplus with a $496,000 reversion. So that is great news. And ultimately, that's going to help the fund, which in a minute I'll get into the fund condition statement. But next on the list is the DOI or Division of Investigation Services historical costs. And this is basically a snapshot of the investigation services costs over the years. And it is a little bit tricky in the sense that the costs roll over every 2 years. So although fortunately there has been a big decrease in the amount that the board has been utilizing DOI's investigation services, which ultimately is going to reduce costs, it takes 2 years for those to actually take effect, in essence. So hence the reason why this actual report is called a 2-year roll forward, because every 2 years is when you actually see the effects of those savings, in this case, take place. So as mentioned in the memo, because of the fact that the board is relying less on DOI and using its own in-house inspection program, that basically has resulted in significant cost savings. And then those will be reflected in 2021, 2022. So next time around when we have updated reports, they'll show that next year. And overall, even just going through these years, you can see that the budgeted amount has been decreasing due to the fact that the board is using their services less. So more good news there as well. And then lastly is the fund condition statement. Here we have actuals for 2018, 2019 fiscal year. So you can go ahead and take a look at those in terms of revenue and expenditure, and which ultimately ends in 4.5 months in reserve for in moving on to 2019, 2020. Once again, these are projections and they are taking into account FM11. So basically all the numbers that we have through May. And with that being said, the months in reserve at the end of fiscal year 2019-2020 comes out to 4.6. So just a slight uptick from 18-19, but it's really in 2020-21 where we're seeing a larger increase in the months in reserve, which is ultimately good news. And that's mostly due to the fact that there's that emergency fund a fee increase that took place in January. I believe it was late January, I think January 27th. So that's ultimately going to have its largest impact in 2020-21 moving forward. But it also played a role in 2019-20 because about 5-6 months definitely were impacted significantly on the revenue side in a positive manner. So as you can see, the months in reserve kind of stabilize at 5.0, and we'll track those numbers, and because right now those are just the expenditures and revenues in 2020, 21, and 21, 22. Those are just appropriated amounts or anticipated revenues due to the workload data that the board provides us. So ultimately, we don't really know if those will become realized, but that's kind of what we're projecting to see moving forward. If anything, maybe it could be even better picture than this fund condition statement is showing, or opposite, but we'll keep track of that moving forward as we get more financial data throughout this fiscal year that we're currently in. It's only July right now, and in October, that's when we're expecting 1920 to close out. So we'll have official numbers for that year and hopefully some early preliminary data for 2020-21. That way we can actually show a better picture of the fund condition. But overall, like I said, from a budget office perspective, very good news across the board. The fund looks healthy, and that about does it on my end. But go ahead and answer any questions that might be needed to be addressed right now.
Thank you. I think Christina, is your hand up? Okay, go ahead.
Sorry, I thought I would let other people ask some questions, but but you read my mind. I had a couple of questions, and it's, forgive me, I think I'm trying to pull it up on my phone, which is because it's hard with the dual screens. And I know that budgeting, there's a lot of projections, and you're just trying to kind of put things, sort of numbers to different line items and make projections. Right. But and I know there's a lot of really good news, so I'm not trying to harp on some of the bad news. I just had a couple questions because there were some big differences in like the fingerprint reports, and then I guess the facility operations, which seemed odd since we're not even there anymore. So I just wondered if you could explain that or comment on it anyway.
Yeah, of course. For facilities operations, the main chunk of that is the rent and lease that's paid for the office space. So that's still there. And out of the 102,000 that was appropriated, almost 131,000 was already expended through fiscal month 11. So just keeping that trend or considering that trend, I projected that roughly 143,000 was going to be expended through the whole fiscal year. So, yeah, I hope that addresses that. And then I think you did mention something about fingerprints as well.
I did, but just before we move on to that, so I'm always, I've dealt with some other budgeting things, and I'm always curious as to, particularly when there's something that is a known cost, doesn't really vary, like rent and lease, how that could be so off in our budget to begin with, how we could be so like over at the end when we already know, like we know what the cost of that is. So did it change on us?
Right, that's a good point. I think ultimately, 102,000 is just the appropriation that's been given to facilities operations, and that can obviously be increased at some point, just moving down the road. As you mentioned, rents and leases, those are usually something that are pretty doable in terms of tracking, and overall they do tend to increase, depending on the lease, maybe every 6 months or every 12 months. As everyone knows, rent usually goes up, if anything. And it's just a matter of that appropriation getting an increase from the current level, which is 102,000, which is doable. They just would have to take an augmentation for that specific line item just to revise it to.
Yeah, and then the fingerprinting thing, it just was a lot more than what was budgeted for.
Right, and that's another thing where even historically, if you look back at some of the other years, it's averaging, I would say, roughly 200,000. Or no, that's the other one. It's looks like fingerprints is. Or are you talking about fingerprint reports? Sorry, I was looking at reimbursements. Because there's another fingerprint one down there. But for fingerprint reports, it has a budget of 6,000, and yeah, clearly that one is way over. That's another example where the appropriation for that just has not been increased. I'm assuming recently, but it can be. That can definitely be adjusted.
Yeah, and I think that's probably just because it's kind of a new program, and so it's kind of like, oh, we'll appropriate what was done last year because it probably will be the same, but really it was a lot more apparently. The last point, I'm sorry, I don't mean to, I just really do want to just understand it a little bit better, is to me that at the end, those last, the sort of, what is it called? The fund condition, and it sounds like everybody's really happy about that, and I think that's great that we're happy about it. It doesn't look that different to me. 4.6 months in reserve to 5 months in reserve, I guess, doesn't look that different to me, and it seems like we just did this huge fee increase. But am I just like not grasping the scope of it? Is it really actually very, very different?
So I think that's a great point you mentioned. The 6,600 is in the expenditure section for 2020-21 on the fund condition statement. That is just the appropriated budget that Veterinary Medical Board is allocated for 2020-21, but that doesn't mean that the board is actually going to expend to that amount. Just like this fiscal year, there could theoretically be a reversion next year too. For this fiscal year that just ended, 1920, we're projecting close to a $500,000 reversion, whereas for display purposes, we're showing full appropriation, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be fully appropriated. So with full appropriation and with revenue being fully realized, that's when we'll see a 5 months in reserve. But, we haven't gotten any numbers for 2020-21 yet. So moving forward at the budget, from the budget office's end, we're going to track how revenue numbers are coming in as well as expenditures. And then, based off of those projections, we'll, kind of tailor these numbers accordingly. But right now, these are just for display purposes, according to the May revise, which ultimately became the enacted budget about a month ago.
That
So,
was really helpful. Thank you.
so
Of course,
Jessica,
no problem.
and then Jessica, and then Kathy.
Yeah, I just wanted to expand a little more, Dr. Bradbury, on your question. If you recall, prior to the fee increase, the fund condition was in much more dire straits, where it was to the point where it was going negative. So the fee increase definitely helps to right the fund. One thing, though, that I do want to point out is that, again, what Vikram had said about how this is just a point in time and they're just projections. One thing that happened over the actually this fiscal year, we get approved for 6 full-time employees for enforcement. So that BCP is in here. So what I understand that the board did this massive fee increase, but when they were doing that, the BCP wasn't included in that. So the expenditures also went up to pay for the 6 full-time staff that we are working on recruiting right now. Also, while it shows a 5-month in reserve and starting to be stable, if we pursue additional staff, that the 5-month in reserve will most likely decrease. So it's certainly something that we are monitoring closely, trying to be as efficient as possible, but still understanding that there's several areas where we feel like we still need additional staffing.
Okay, Kathy.
Hi, thank you. And thanks, Christina asked a couple of questions I was going to, but thank you, Vikram. I have a couple of questions for you and then maybe for Jessica. One thing on the OAL hearings, I know we attribute in the text here in the copy some of the savings to the fact that some of the hearings have been postponed, but we are still showing 90,000 sort of over under the hearings category, and I just was confused about that, and maybe I'm misinterpreting the actual text of the expenditure report in the beginning of the memo that Tim did. So that's one of my questions. And I realized we clearly just didn't budget for court reporters, but obviously have had expenses for court reporters, which also attributes to that. So that's one of my questions. And then, well, let me ask that one first, just to see.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, Vikram, I'll jump in and then you can elaborate if needed. But it's actually not uncommon, I think, to not have a budget line item specifically for court reporters and to go over for the office administrative hearings. That's something that we could try to adjust through a budget change proposal to allocate more funding for OAH. But when we talked about the cost savings because of the hearings being delayed, it's really the cost savings for the Attorney General's office. If we had anticipated multiple hearings at the end of the fiscal year and they were going to be multi-days, that cost for just the sheer the Attorney General would be significant. And so that's where when we were talking about the hearings being delayed, it's not necessarily attributed to the office administrative hearing savings, but more so the Attorney General's office.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then Jessica, I know on the salaries, we have a big savings there. And is that because we just didn't fill some of the positions?
Yeah, that was due to the vacancies that we had.
Okay, whoops, sorry, I've got a parrot in the background now. And then I wanted to ask Vikram on the DOI report. I think, is there under the 1920 fiscal year, is there, we have nothing in actual cost line item? That seemed like wrong to me that there's supposed to be something there.
I will admit I'm not an expert on this particular report, but my understanding is that due to the fact that there were so many savings in previous fiscal years, there are no costs due to the roll forward in 1920, 2021. But as I mentioned, this is not something that I particularly created. So but that is my ultimate understanding of how this works. Because there were so many savings earlier in previous years, it got rolled over as looks like it says as a credit to, so that's an accounting term, I guess, for the future fiscal years.
So actually, I'm sorry. So Kathy, if you're referring to the actual cost of 2019-20, correct?
Yeah, 1920, right.
Yeah, so please keep in mind that that fiscal year just ended. So it ended at June 30th, and so it takes some time to get actual costs. So right now, that's why that you're seeing a line, because we don't have those sheer numbers yet.
That makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Mhm. Is that all of your questions, Kathy?
Yeah, that's it on these docs.
I've got Christina, your hand is still up. Do you have another question?
No, sorry.
Okay. Okay. I just have a few, and I think Kathy answered the one because we talked about the BCP showing up in the budget, but then we probably didn't have a chance to hire people in time, and so that's why you get all that. So that's why it's 8.8%, right, of your budget. That's why it's so high, and in reality, it's more like 5%, 5 months. I'm sorry, instead of 8.8. But my question was, I forgot, what is the legal requirements? How many months in reserve are we supposed to have? And what, there is a window, right? So I can't remember what that window is. So that's my question.
Yeah, we have to maintain a minimum of 3 months in reserve.
Is there a maximum?
You know, I don't recall off the top of my head. I don't think we've ever been in danger of having a maximum, but I don't know off the top of my head.
This is Cheryl. It's 10 months.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I think it might be 10.
Okay, thank you. The other thing is there anywhere that we can actually track what it costs us to be loaning our employees out for tracking? You see what I mean? It seems like, are we keeping track of that somewhere else, or?
Yeah, Bikram, she's referring to the staff person that we are now loaning for contact tracing. And Dr. Nolan, just so you know, one thing that we have to report monthly to the budget office is any COVID-19 related costs. And just recently, we started tracking the cost of the employee who's going to be going over to contact tracing. So that's something that we'll be tracking and reporting to the budget office monthly.
Right, and I just think we need to pay attention to that on our budget. The other thing we might need to pay attention to is you don't have a lot of people back in the office, right? But when you do start bringing it back, it's going to cost you a lot more money to clean the office and to do COVID-19 related biosecurity. So I'm just throwing that out there that, you know, maybe it's time. I know this budget is sort of dictated to you, but we should probably put a line item in there about that moving forward. It's just a thought. That's all I had. Anybody else? Cheryl?
So along those lines, have you had any staff be COVID positive?
No, but I'm not sure how public we would make it if we did. Just
I know you can't.
It's a health issue.
Yeah, I know you can't release names, but just curious because that gets expensive. Yeah.
I don't want to jinx it, but not yet.
Am I right in saying that this budget, the line items on this budget are dictated to you, or do we actually develop new ones if we want?
So all of the line items under a current year revised budget, that is set in stone in the governor's budget. If we want to change the line item, we do so through a budget change proposal.
Okay, any other questions? I don't think so. So thank you very much. And we'll move on.
All right. Thank you guys for the opportunity to present today. And thanks, Jessica, for hopping in and answering some of those questions for me. And thank you, Tim, for putting this memo together, which really kind of helped guide the whole presentation. So
Okay.
have a wonderful rest of your day, everyone, and take care.
All right. Thank you, Bikram. All right. I'm going to go back to board communication objectives. We are aware of the complaints we've been receiving about the board's responsiveness to communications from the public, and these have been identified as issues not just with staffing, but with all the different avenues of communication available to the board. As you can see, the board has 5 email addresses that all need to be checked by various staff in the respective units. This has caused some confusion, especially with high turnover on who is supposed to be checking what and how often. Additionally, with the telephone system, the board has 4 lines or 5 lines as well. And with staff turnover again, this has caused some delays in responsiveness to the public and our licensees and candidates seeking questions. The mail has changed, of course, because of COVID. We do still have in-house staff who process mail daily. We still receive mail daily from the department. We are working ways to get mail to our remotely working staff by scanning documents to them as quickly as we can, but this does take some time. It's just a process we're trying to adapt to. In light of that, we are really encouraging our licensees and candidates and whomever else contacts the boards to send things electronically. That really saves staff time on processing items, whether it be a complaint or supplemental documentation, continuing education credits, anything along that nature. Legislation and regulations were previously discussed. We are making forward progress on our regulations. I'm really proud of Justin and all the work he's put into that, moving the board's regulations forward. I know he's put in a lot of hours working on that. The diversion committee met in July, and our next committee meeting is in October. These have been done virtually, same as how the board is doing it. And as you can see, the goals that I have, hopefully for the next year, updating the website. We do receive comments that our website's not the most accessible in finding information. We're working on detailing instructional videos to help candidates and licensees find the information they're looking for much more easily, including updating our FAQs. We're working with OIO to process map the board's processes, and we'll be developing staff manuals based off those improvements that we can identify. And that will help make everything much more efficient with our staff. Do you have any comments or questions on the administrative side?
Kathy has her hand up. Is that true?
It is true, actually. Thanks, Tim. Thank you very much for this. Oh God, I'm sorry. That's Martha in the background calling for me. Anyway, real quick. On the phone system, the thing about reducing it to one main line, the receptionist parceling it all out, is that something you guys plan to do after we're not working remotely anymore, or is that just for the remote situation?
I believe it's something we are planning to implement in the near future. Staff have been part of a pilot program with Microsoft Teams phone numbers, which allows us to make calls from our home computers through Teams, which has been a boon to staff instead of using personal lines to contact everyone.
I'm working with Microsoft Teams with another group of people, and actually it's really got a lot of great features, so I can understand that. And then I was just impressed. It said staff is responsible for responding to voicemails within 24 hours. And is staff still able to do that? That just was one of my questions.
We're trying our best to do that. Sometimes it's not possible. We do receive a high volume of phone calls from everybody. Most commonly, over the past month or so, it has been renewing premises. We still receive a lot of calls regarding fingerprints and the new requirement that the board has for that, and how to best accomplish that. And then, of course, when COVID hit, all of the questions on practice, we received a very high volume, especially on telemedicine, VCPR, and again, how to get fingerprinting and licensure process during that time. So we do our best to return the phone calls in a timely manner. However, the best way really to reach us is through email. We are much more responsive and it's easier to get back to our contacts through that way.
Okay, I don't see any more questions for you, Tim.
All right.
Thank you very much.
And then I can move on to B, is the examination report. Examination development, we do with the Office of Professional Examination Services in the Department of Consumer Affairs. This was impacted again through COVID because they couldn't hold in-person workshops for exam development. They've worked through this to continue exam development through virtual meetings, and they're starting to re-implement that in the coming months. What they did in the interim was focus more on the board's occupational analysis and item review during the time that the in-person exam development couldn't be done. So they were able to move forward with that. And I believe OPES will be doing a presentation at the next board meeting with the results of the linkage study. With RVT school statistics, we have been reaching out to the AVMA for assistance gathering statistics for the RVT schools so we can hold them accountable with our board's regulations for approval of programs. It's a process that we're working out. Currently, they submit reports to schools independently and individually, and we're asking to see if we can get included with that. And they came back with a cost associated with that we will be reviewing and discussing internally because it's fairly high at this moment.
Sorry, just to clarify, that's not from AVMA, that's AAVSB that we're working with to get those stats.
And here are the pass rates for the schools. And these pass rates are combined first time and repeat. We don't have the ability to separate out the first time candidates. And then the exam statistics for the California State Board, they've fluctuated. It's fairly high right now. And then the NAVLE scores and the VTNE. And we are working with to get examination scores directly imported into the board systems with ICVA. And this would really save down on staff time and processing times for our applicants to process those score reports because it will eliminate a manual process that we do to import the score results and update candidate files. This would handle it automatically. Additionally, as we said, OPES has moved to a virtual online or virtual resource for examination development. They're still working out the kinks for that, but they expect it to continue in a smoother process in the future. They're working out sharing resource materials and communicating examination security to all of our SMEs. Also, we did reduce the RVT application down to 1, which significantly saves board time or board staff time in processing applications and applicant time as well. And of course, the goals that we would like to do is really simplify the process more, make it more efficient for all of our candidates to get through the process. Do you have any questions at this point?
Kathy has her hand raised.
Yes.
One quick thing that you might want to just change so it's consistent. Under your RVT, the exam statistics, California State Board examination, just if you look at the May to October 19, it should be probably under above the percentage. It should be past percentage, not candidates.
Yes.
And then the second, and November 19th through April 20th, just reverse them so they're consistent candidates and past percentage.
Thank you.
And again, sorry about Martha.
Jennifer Laredo.
Just a comment. First off, I love Martha. Hi, Martha. And I'm just surprised that the VT&E pass rate is still at 57%. I know it goes down at the beginning of the year and it tends to rise toward the end of the every time they change the exam. That's just surprising to me. So there's nothing this board can do. I'm just commenting that I'm a little bit surprised.
Yeah, I noticed the same thing, so I would ditto that. Any other comments?
Can I back in? I just want to reiterate, I really think there's something wrong with the NAVLE pass rates here that we should just, the November, December, and the April to June, and the stats. So wanted to just revisit it and maybe we can check the record. April to June is really skewed because obviously it's still going on, but I don't think it's an 82%, but anyway.
That's right, you mentioned that and I forgot about that. So any other questions on this? I think it might be a good idea, Jessica, if we stopped and got public comment or questions at this point because we're getting short on time, and we do that. So yes, we have so far. So moderator, I'd like you to open up for public comment or questions for A, B, and C of item 14 on the agenda.
This is the moderator, and at the direction from the board, I have opened the Q&A panel. If you would like to make a public comment, please indicate that you would like to make a public comment and submit to all panelists. Once your request has been submitted, it will be addressed in the order received. I will now pause a moment to allow individuals to access this feature and submit their requests. No requests have been submitted. Would you like me to close this feature?
Yes, thank you. Okay, so
the panel has been closed.
Thank you. So I think, Tim, are we ready to move on to enforcement to Rob, or?
I still have the licensing report to go over.
I'm sorry, my mistake. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm excited to say that we have filled our examination staff. Let me, share screen. There we go. We've hired our last vacant examination technician position this past June. So we now have a full staff in our licensing and examination unit. They're working very hard to get through all the applications that have been submitted during the shortage and backlog that we acquired. For the fingerprint requirement, we are getting a lot of calls, again, because of COVID, on how to complete the fingerprint requirement, with buildings being closed, and especially with out-of-state people on how to get their fingerprints rolled on hard cards. We're able to provide an updated list of active live scan facilities, which we post on our website every week. We also have the fingerprint live scan form accessible on our website with instructions on how to complete it with the board's information. And we've also recently learned that a lot of live scan sites are informing our licensees and candidates that social security numbers are not required to complete on the form. However, that causes a delay because our system checks for social security numbers, date of birth, and name. They need matches on everything to attach fingerprint results to a candidate's or licensee's record. So it becomes a manual process, and occasionally the licensees or candidates will need to have the fingerprinting redone to submit it and have the board attach it to the records. We're also sending out an email monthly to our licensees who have open renewals that do not have fingerprints in our system. So they're notified several times throughout the process of their open renewal to get the fingerprinting done for their license to become active. As you can see here, the board has received a lot of applications over the past fiscal year. It's a pretty big jump, in my opinion, from the number that was received in the prior fiscal year, which is unfortunately added to the backlog when we were short-staffed. And one update I do need to make, this should say 1819 here and 1920 here to represent current statistics for our licenses issued. That's remained about the same overall. And then pending applications. This is a report we run with our system to pull the number of applications that are still being worked on and need to be worked on in our system. And our licensed population as of July 7th of this year. Again, that should be updated to 2020. It's that. And with our accomplishments, working with the ICVA and AAVSB to develop interfaces to streamline processing of applications and letters of good standings that we send out to other states. So it can be a one resource access point for licensure and throughout the US. This has really assisted and cut down processing times for those licensees as well. We've also worked with Western and UC Davis to have transcripts and diplomas sent to the board directly once graduation commenced. This greatly reduced the amount of time processing for those new veterinarians who wanted to get licensed, as we received those diplomas before they could, in fact, send them to us themselves. So we were able to process them over the next few days and get their licenses updated. We also updated an FAQ on our board's website for students, and we'll be supplementing that with videos on licensure process for the board's different licenses and permits. We've also updated surveys on each of the staff's signatures for more comprehensive feedback and that we can review so we can make more improvements. And again, we are looking to simplify the applications that are submitted to us to reduce the amount of work staff have to do and our applicants need to do to streamline the process and just get people licensed in a much more expeditious manner. We did correct an issue with Breeze where it was expiring applications, which is causing applicants to reapply with us, or board staff would have to try and manually fix dates to have candidates maintain the same application. And this was an involved process which caused a lot of delays that we were glad to get fixed. And again, we're working with the OIO to improve our processes, and we're really looking forward to the improvements that are going to be identified and we can implement in the future. Any questions?
It looks like we have a question from Mark, and Kathy, you probably need to mute because we're listening to.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry. And I do have a question anyway, but let me unhand it.
Yes.
You have to give Martha something like that. Martha needs a clicker. I think it's pretty impressive that in the midst of this pandemic, there's 50 pending premise registration permits. So 50 new places that are opening up in the middle of the pandemic.
Let's see. I can't really directly speak to that. However, they may be open or received via regular mail. This report was also run as of July 1st, so they may have been taken care of. But we are processing applications as expeditiously as we can. We are using staff in other units to help supplement our backlog.
That looks very good. Good job.
Okay, Kathy, you're on.
And I'm really sorry about leave. I didn't even notice that. This is a great report. Thank you very much. And the staff obviously is, doing a great job under all these bizarre conditions. One thing I want to clarify for anybody, but for me, the fingerprint requirement requiring 4 matching data sets, that's a DCA or a state of California or DOJ, or it's not just our board's requirement, correct? It's
correct. That's the 4 data sets that DOJ needs to match to our record.
Okay. Yeah. So we might want to clarify that that's just not the board's requirement. It is what we're required to do. And then question, is there on the pending applications, I know one of the impediments is where they're missing information. Is it worthwhile to maintain a subset of those that are just, obviously you could have gotten them in yesterday or whatever, but there's probably a subset or certain percentage that are missing information that you're having to go and chase. And I'm wondering if you have any sense of what that random percentage might be of these pending apps in any one of the categories.
That's hard to say right now because there are different ways and different parts along the path to licensure where documentation may be missing, such as a diploma required for final licensure. That's required as the final step for licensure for veterinarians. So we can have everything done for our students, but they just need to graduate to complete the licensure process. Or there could be fingerprints missing. They may have failed a test and waiting for results on that end.
Okay. And right below that, is the licensee population as of July 7th, 2020, or is it 2019?
It's as of 2020.
It is. Okay, cool. I just want to
And Kathy, I just wanted to elaborate more on what we can do as far as break it out. There are capabilities in Breeze to allow this. In the past, though, staff wasn't fully utilizing the mechanism, and it's what we call milestones that we're able to put into Breeze, which essentially stops the clock. And then it also would differentiate those that we have that are complete applications versus incomplete applications. Right. So staff's now working to fully utilize what Breeze can do. And so I think in the future, we will be able to break those out and report those numbers.
Yes. Okay, cool. And then lastly, on the licensing survey that you guys just launched, and I think that's a great idea too, is your hope that early next year you might have, I know you have to process it and you need enough respondents and stuff, but you'd have some sort of data back next year sometime? Is that what the goal is on that survey?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. That's it. Thank you. Good work.
Jessica, did you say everything you wanted to say, or you still have your hand up? Okay, Cheryl, you're next.
So a couple of things. So one of them, Kathy, what we talked about yesterday at the MDC is that the Dr. Sullivan and Christy Pulowski, who are doing this survey, they're hoping to gather data in like 2 months and decide if they've gotten enough response rate. And if they haven't, they're going to go to plan B on trying to collect data. So that's that. And then 2, my question for Jessica is, what are our response rates? What are they like now for people who are applying for a veterinarian who's applying for a license? So I know at one time when we were really hit that it was, out to like 16, 18 weeks to turn around to for them to get a license. Where are we now? How many weeks is it?
So I don't have that information readily available right now. One of the things on here, we had talked about increased transparency. As you know, on our website, we are reporting on our intake processing times, which is the time it takes for us. This from when we get the application to the time that to the time that we're able to touch the application. What we've been working with our IT team is to have a more in-depth capture of the data and the cycle times. So we hopefully by October to have those in-depth cycle times to you, and also post that on our website, not just the time it takes for us to do intake. So I don't have those right now, but we will at the next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I don't see anyone else have any questions, but I just have one, and I remember very vividly Dr. Pasco approaching the board at our last meeting, or one of the last meetings. And if you look at the data, and I know the very low numbers, but we have 115 university veterinarians that have a clear license, and we have 19 pending. So is there a reason why such a high percentage of those are still pending, or do they annually come in at a certain time of the year or something?
I'm actually familiar with some of these right now, and unfortunately, it's dealing with COVID and fingerprint requirements for out of country licensees.
And in addition, because of COVID too, they're having trouble getting a visa to be in the country, and so there's been some concerns because they don't have a social security number. They're not able to get an ITIN number. So a lot of them have applied, but because of COVID, they're holding up.
So we're not the ones holding them up. It's other things. Got it. Okay, just curious. Okay, Cheryl, your hand is still up, but maybe you just didn't put it down, or. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Tim. Is that the end of this report, the licensing, I think?
That's it. Okay.
It's now 5:00, and so we need to make a decision as to whether we have a break or we press on. I think we have enforcement, probation, hospital inspection, and outreach, and then we also have items 15. We have two options. We can press forward and continue and try to finish this, or we can turf it to tomorrow, and that would be added or tacked on to the board meeting after our closed sessions when we came back into open. So I guess I need a feel from the board members if they are capable of pressing on and trying to finish this. And let me ask you this: anybody not capable of staying with us right now, raise your hand. Cheryl's hand is up. Does that mean you can't stay with us, Cheryl? Oh, her hand is down. Okay. It looks like we're going to press on. Is everybody okay if we don't take a break right now? We just keep going? Does somebody need a break? I see heads nodding yes. Okay, I'm going to take that as we're going to press on.
Sorry,
Yes?
this is the moderator. Kathy was raising her hand.
I was raising my real hand. Yeah, thank you.
Sorry. Yeah, okay.
Not my little tiny hand, my big hand.
I'm staring at the board hands. Yeah, so Kathy, any comment?
Yeah, I can only stay on really for about a half hour more at the most, because I got to go pick up my guy from the vet. So
okay. I'm in the same boat, to be honest. So let's press on and see if we can get as much as we can done. I guess Rob is up next with enforcement.
Sure. You want me to just jump into it, or are we taking a break?
No, I think we better jump into it.
Okay, sounds good. I'll just kind of hit the high points. So obviously, with everything that's going on, it's been pretty tough on staff. It's definitely an unprecedented time. They are doing really well with telecommuting. We had been doing it one day a week before, but now obviously full time, it's kind of a big change. We do have one of our staff members at the facility, at the suite.
I'm sorry, Rob, to interrupt. Can you actually share your screen so they know what you're looking at?
Oh. All right, let me bring it. Hold on. Can't find the mouse. Okay. Can't even see it. I think it's that one. Okay. So you can see that then?
Yes, thank you.
All right. Okay. So, actually on the wrong screen for me now, though. Okay. So they've been doing a really great job, staff, of dealing with everything going on right now. I think in order to facilitate and try and keep morale as high as possible, we've been having daily calls, video conference calls. Not only with staff, we have it with management as well, just because it's really, really important because we don't have a physical presence. And so it's a totally different environment, I think, for most state employees, because it's a big change. Staff has been fantastic with showing empathy for each other during this time. I know there's been a lot of staff members who have been concerned about everything that's been going on, but they've been really supportive, not only of what's going on personally, but work as well. So I want to just say kudos to them. It's been pretty great. Let's see, Attorney General's office. Obviously, Carl already did a presentation on what's going on there. The cycle times for our discipline did rise by 29% over last year, which, as we've discussed before, we're working on the oldest cases, so that was kind of expected. But our staff is keeping close tabs on D of I and the AG's office. Intake has done a great job this year. They met their performance measurement of 10 days for cycle times, basically taking the complaint in and then assigning it to an analyst. We had a little over 1,300 complaints submitted this year, which is pretty similar to what it was last year. And then we did have an increase in the criminal cases, but that's because we shifted them over from licensing. Let's see. The pie chart that I normally provide is pretty similar to what it's been in the prior board meetings and the prior year. As far as the percentages, we're still looking at the majority of our complaints received are negligence and incompetence, so that's our highest priority complaint. Really makes it hard to prioritize when the majority are high priority. See, pending cases. The team closed 22% more cases than last year. And those had a higher cycle time, which was also expected. We are closing the older cases, or at least focusing on those. However, the buckets did increase pretty much in all areas because we do have older cases, but we receive newer cases as well that are attached, companion cases to those old cases. A lot of times, and I think many board members are aware of it, we have some frequent flyers when it comes to those we take discipline against. So we tend to get complaints just kind of, dribbling in as time goes by. Division investigation, as it was previously mentioned, we did use a lot less hours than we had previously. So it looks like in, I think it was 16, 17, we used about a quarter of the hours we used then this most recent year. We only used about half of the requests for D of I this year versus last year. So all of that should equal some savings in the future. And really what we're trying to do is utilize our inspection program a lot more. And I think it's been just really valuable because it's a lot cheaper, a lot faster. I think I've said on multiple occasions, I can't speak enough about the inspection program. Some of the accomplishments that fall in line with our strat plan objectives, our new strat plan objectives. Let's see. So expediting consumer protection. So we are trying to expedite our discipline to the AG's office, as was discussed earlier. We are collaborating more with the AG's office. We did refresh the expert witness program, as was mentioned during the MDC meeting previously. And that was just to have better expectations for our expert witnesses and just have a better overall written report. I mentioned we had reduced D of I usage, which is pretty big. Let's see. I said we closed more cases. That was another accomplishment. Let's see. We did fill all our vacancies, but we are going to have to fill some additional vacancies by the BCP, which is going to be pretty big. We're really looking forward to that because we do have a backlog of, I think, 2435 as of this report. So pretty large backlog. Let's see. The citation limitations, it was already discussed about the regulatory proposal, which was to make our citation process a little bit more streamlined and a little bit better, more flexible for what we can do. We did issue more citations this year than last year, I think nearly double. And as far as those citations go, it looks like it was about, let's see. Yeah, nearly half of the citations we issued were to unlicensed individuals. And this ties into our strat plan objective of unlicensed activity and using tools. And then for some of these citations that we did issue, we did invoke BPC 149, which allows us to cut off their phone connection if they're using it to advertise unlicensed services. One of the nice things that we're working on too is another strat plan objective is the website update. So prior to this update, Breeze would house the enforcement actions, so citations and discipline, only on licensees. And now with the website being updated, we can now house the enforcement actions for everyone. So if it's an unlicensed person, the public can go on our website and actually see that citation, whereas previously there'd be no way for them to have quick access to it rather than contacting us and requesting a citation. So that's going to be a pretty big benefit. We also receive regular PRAs from law firms inquiring about the enforcement activities on a month-by-month basis, and our website will now sort them on a monthly basis, so they can simply go there and we can avoid the whole PRA process.
PRA is a Public Records Act request.
Right. Public Records Act. Tim mentioned previously working with OIO, so we have begun the mapping process of our enforcement procedures. So it's going to be, some of them are going to be intake, AG referral, probation monitoring, expert referral, and then we'll use those maps to streamline the enforcement process even more. We'll use it as training, and then most importantly, developing procedure manuals, which will tie into a lot of success of our unit. And overall, that's covering a few of our strat plan objectives as well, just touching on those. Increasing our collaboration with other boards. We've increased it with other boards as well as state agencies when it comes to some of the complaints that we get. And then also, and I don't know if this is quite in line with that, but it's collaborating with the Division of Investigation and the AG's office. We do that on a regular basis. I know I've contacted the supervisors at D of I and at the AG's office to talk about what we actually have pending over there and really trying to streamline the process and save costs wherever we can. Complaint priority, it's another strat plan objective. We continue to prioritize it based on that Business and Professions Code, which was demonstrated by the pie chart above. But it does, like I said, it makes it difficult because it seems like everything is a high priority complaint. But luckily, we did meet our cycle time, which is really, really good. And then our pending backlog and intake is basically the amount that our intake staff can handle in one day. So we've whittled that down to a manageable number. And now intake can also handle emails, handle phone calls on an expedited basis as well. Although they've been really, really good about that regardless. Promoting transparency, that's another strat plan objective. And I think one of the great things that staff has been doing is they've been very responsive to our complainants. They create a really clear expectation of the investigation process. It's really, really difficult right now because we are backlogged. And I think most people complaining about a licensee or a registrant want to have resolution quickly. And unfortunately, that's not the reality of it. Obviously, with our backlog, it's not possible to have something closed within 90 days, as much as we all want it to be. So staff has done a great job of creating these expectations and at the same time, just empathizing with their situation. So I think that's really, really important. So goals for next year, we want to continue to expedite consumer protection. And then we also want to increase our usage of technology. I know Breeze was one of the big ones. Obtaining additional staff. This is going to be really nice. The 6 positions from the BCP. I think it's going to be good to see some progress when it comes to that backlog, and I know that we're really, really excited about that. I mentioned further utilize Breeze. I think there's definitely some ways we can innovate that into our complaint process. We want to re-examine our performance measures. I know that's been a concern of not only board members, I know board staff, just to create realistic expectations of what our measurement should be, our targets. But I think having that additional staff will give us a better baseline to base those targets on. And then finalizing procedure manuals. That's another couple of objectives we want to work on. Once the mapping process is complete, we're going to utilize that to finish our procedure manuals. We already have some drafts that we have been using, but we want to continue on that. And then, of course, it goes into the mail vote results and some of the stats. But I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Rob. Mark has his hand up.
Sure.
The unlicensed activity complaints, are those mostly the non-anesthetic dentals?
We do frequently get the non-anesthetic dental complaints. We have gotten some for, not to go into it too much, but just, the straight up veterinary practice when it comes to like surgery, cutting the animal open.
Yeah.
So we have gotten some of those. I think what I've noticed sometimes with our unlicensed complaints is we'll get them in batches. So there might be in many cases, I think there's a licensee who sees, hey, this dental operation is operating. This is unlicensed practice, and then they maybe do a Google search or something like that, because we'll receive them kind of in batches. So we'll receive a couple at one time.
When you talked about surgery, you're talking about non-DBMs doing surgery. That's unlicensed activity.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay. I think that's really awesome that we're able to put unlicensed activity on our website. That's like people who are not under our jurisdiction on our website. That's really cool for consumer protection. And then the other thing I had, when a consumer looks up a license or verifies a license on our website, disciplinary action, is that on the website too? Can the consumer see disciplinary action?
Yeah. So right now, the way that it's been done is you'll hop onto Breeze and you'll type in a veterinarian's license number, for example, and you'll click on it and you'll see the little gavel where it'll show disciplinary action. And then you can view that associated document. We're required to have that posted there. What's going to happen is that'll still remain. So you can hop onto the Breeze license lookup and see that disciplinary action, but you're also going to see that mirrored on our website. So our website will say, we'll have a section that says, July 2020 enforcement actions. And then in there, it'll have blurbs with links for citation issued for X against this person. If it's an unlicensed person, then obviously it's not going to link it to that Breeze profile where the document would be housed. Yeah. It's going to be housed on our site. And then if it's a licensee, it'll go directly to Breeze and link it. But it'll be on both, basically.
I'm talking about license holders. When a consumer looks up a license to find out if a veterinarian has a license, they can see that the veterinarian does have a license. But I heard recently that no disciplinary action or history is on that website. They can't see they're on probation or they've had to. Is that true?
So actually, Rob, I'll jump in and just provide clarification. So in a lot of them, you're going to see, I would think the most of them, you're going to see that if there's disciplinary action taken, then it will indicate that the disciplinary action has happened. What we found, though, that is inconsistent with it is how we were posting the disciplinary documents. And so there are some where we found that maybe the accusation itself was posted, but not the final order, or vice versa. And it's just not a complete picture of what happened. We have unfortunately also seen instances where the discipline was not tied to the license lookup, which means that if someone were to go to the license search, there have been times that we've identified where they may have been disciplined quite some time ago, but it was unfortunately not linked to the record correctly. One project that we have started once we realized that is to have our staff go and manually pull all of the disciplinary files that we've taken. We're having to organize the documents, which they were not well organized. So it's taking some time, and they're scanning those in and attaching them to the license record. As you can imagine, this is going to take some time, but we're working to address it. But I would say, by and large, most of them are going to they're going to say that there's discipline on it if there's been discipline, but not necessarily have all of the disciplinary records public for the consumers.
That has to be thousands of files that you're going to have to go through.
Wow.
It's a lot. It's a lot. But that's just a testament to the staff that we have. I know that, our newest intake technician has really, she actually said, "Oh, this is like my baby now." She's really taken ownership of it. And I think one of the things that I pointed out is just having access or exposure to those disciplinary documents makes you become more familiar with what to expect. And just in speaking to her about this, she's said, "Oh, I was looking for this and I can't find this, and shouldn't this be there?" And she's really starting to increase her knowledge just by exposing herself to those disciplinary documents. So it's definitely a massive project, though.
They can do that remotely. They don't have to go into the office. Or
no, she is going in. We're trying to be as flexible as possible. She's going in on a infrequent basis to get the scanning done. The attaching of it to the profile is done. That's going to be done on the remote side. So we're basically trying to get the bulk of it scanned, what needs to be scanned, and then once they're remote, that's when they can make sure that it's properly linked on that profile and all the files are on one file, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, we're trying to minimize any time in the office if possible.
Okay, thank you.
So Rob, I don't see any more questions, but I just have a couple of comments, and I really want to commend you for focusing on staff morale. I think especially during this time of a pandemic, a lot of staff working at home have family members, children, et cetera. So anything you can do to try to increase their morale and foster teamwork is really to be commended. So
thank you.
When are we going to get the BCP positions? We keep talking about them. Is there a timeline?
Well, we've begun the recruitment process right now. I don't know if we have it the final to where it'll be posted today, but everything on the back end is ready to go. So I think once the green light, which should be any moment, is ready to go, then those should be posted, and we're going to immediately start recruiting for those. And I know one of the great things too is word has gotten around about these vacancies. And I know I've talked to probably half a dozen people or friends of people who've worked for the state, and they're interested in these positions. And some of them have enforcement experience, which is great. Some of the recommendations are coming from people who really, really I hold in high regard. So I'm really excited actually about the pool that we're getting. I know these are limited term positions, and normally those are a little tougher to fill because most people want a permanent position with the state. They don't want to chance it. But luckily it's a good length of time for a limited term position, and we're already getting some good interest. So I think we're gonna have a really good pool. So I am excited, and I think the staff is excited too. Obviously, they're carrying over 600 cases apiece. So anything to cut down on that.
So maybe 60 to 90 days. Jessica, I'm looking at you because how long does it take once they get the job posted? You have to post them for 30 days, I'm guessing. And
we only have to post them for 10 days, but it takes quite a bit of time to go through all the applications. But I would say within hopefully 3 months we can get these positions filled. One thing to keep in mind is that we would have liked to start recruiting for these positions a lot sooner, but unfortunately because of the budget and the fact that the governor put a budget through, and then the legislature put their own budget through, and there was a lot of negotiating because of COVID. It really delayed the process of starting the RPA, the request for personnel action, the packages we do to fill the positions. So we hope within the next 90 days we can have these filled.
That's great. Good news. And how long are the terms for? Is it 2 year or?
It's a 3-year.
3 year. Okay, thanks. And then my only last question was, looks like we're doing a lot more work with the OIO. Are they charging us for all that? Is that a charge? Is there a charge associated with the work that they're doing to help us?
I believe that's part of our pro rata, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So yes, okay. Okay, any other questions? No, I think it's great. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Rob?
Thanks.
So who will take over on probation?
So we're going to have actually Ginger and Rob both provide that report.
Okay, we're only
board members.
minutes. So do we want to? How do you want to handle this, Jessica? Let's go ahead and do this, and then we'll wait on F and G for tomorrow.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, board members, Madam President. I hope you guys are doing well. It's good to see you. Rob and I did this report together, and I was just going to do this portion briefly and hand it over to Rob. But as of July, we have about 96 licensees on probation with one interim suspension order. It's kind of like a probation order. 76 are veterinarians with 7 in a told status. And if you'll recall, told means that it takes a lot less monitoring because they're not practicing or they're out of state. We have 19 RVTs on probation with 4 tolling. I just want to apologize. Previously, I had reported that we had no VACSs. I had been reporting them all as RVTs on the assumption that people that weren't vets were RVTs, and I won't be doing that anymore. Sorry about that. We have 29 probationers participating in our biological fluid testing program, and we have about 70 complaints on 21 probationers with, I think, 18 complaints on one, anywhere from 1 to 18. And we have 9 probationers pending cases at the Attorney General's office. I've really not been able to spend the time I've wanted to on thorough case reviews and or time on my complaints, but in late June, with the blessings of my superiors, Wendy Garsky volunteered to take some work off my desk that are the discipline cases at the AG's office. She really has a lot of experience with that. And I just want to thank her for that and my bosses. In May, I began tracking letters that we send for non-compliance issues. And since May, we've sent about 16 of those. And I'm just going to give it to Rob. And be available for questions.
Okay, can you hear me? I couldn't find the control panel was lost. Can you hear me? Yes? No? Yes? Okay. All right.
Yes. Yes.
So one of the big things that we've noticed just recently is just probation is the staffing there is not great. Ginger has been wonderful at taking this in stride because I know that she is not one to complain and she's not one to cause a fuss. But she has a lot of experience, obviously, in probation. But what I've noticed is that we have had a significant turnover with probation, specifically at this board. It looks like, and what I have here is we had about 62 probationers in 14-15, and then that jumped to around 116-17, and that's really where it's kind of stayed. But we've had the same resources for probation. And one of the things that really speaks volumes is we've had 4 different probation monitors in the last 3 years. And from what I can tell, we've had over a dozen people touching probation in the last 6 years. So really, it's one of these areas that I think a lot of people just don't, they see the challenge there. They see that it can't be done with the resources. And they don't want to even, endeavor to do it. Like I said, Ginger's been wonderful about keeping a stiff upper lip, and there are definitely days where I think that she's kind of pulling her punches about how frustrated she is. But I know that she has the board's best interest in mind. She's really, really impressed me, and I know Jessica as well, with how much she cares about consumer protection. She really takes a look at some of these probation conditions and the probationers who she's monitoring, and really dissects what's going on. And I think it really, really, I can't say enough about Ginger. She's been wonderful. So I think that's really it when it comes to the staff that's going on there. What's going to probably happen too is with the addition of that BCP, we're probably going to have some additional probationers that are going to pop in because of the added workload that's going to be completed. And then to deal with this realistically, we are going to have to pursue a BCP for an additional probation monitor. And that would basically split the probationers between Ginger and then the new person. And then we also want to get an office technician who would handle all the day-to-day quarterly reports, logging stuff in Breeze, just the technical tasks, basically, because those are extremely, extremely time-consuming. And obviously, Ginger has to do everything at this point. In addition, she has several of her probationers who are at the AG's office. And we just dealing with the DAG who's assigned to a case can be extremely time consuming as well. So, like I said, she is definitely spread thin, but we want to try and get her what she can. And that's why, I mean, she did mention that Wendy Garsky, one of our analysts, has been helping with some of the cases at the AG's office, which has been fantastic. But once again, it speaks to how the staff is really stepping up and helping each other out. And, they've been great because the time has been really tough right now with all the stress going around. So that's, I think that's really it, what we're looking at right now. There are some accomplishments that that Ginger might want to go over. I think in the unit, did you? She's very, very shy. So those are listed here under 1819 accomplishments. That should be actually 1920. But she provided some clarification about the supervisor condition to her probationers. We did but we increased our utilization of the inspection program. So some of our probationers who have a supervisor condition, we started to send our inspectors to go out, pull records, compare what's been approved by some of the supervisors. And obviously, if the supervisor is just saying, hey, this record's fine and there's no problems, and then we find a problem, then we could unapprove that supervisor because they're basically just phoning it in. We did initiate a probation file cleanup, so we utilized some other resources. Some of our intake technicians were really instrumental there, and that was basically just getting a status update of many of our probationers. We obviously, and I think it was mentioned before in one of our prior meetings, we did plan on going out and meeting with all of our probationers because that's something that we need to do on a regular basis. But we have not been able to do it based on the resources. And then obviously COVID hit and we had to cancel. I don't know. It was probably, 40 or 50 meetings, maybe, Ginger. I don't know, somewhere around there. It was a lot that we had planned. So let's see. And then Ginger is now tracking the number of non-compliance notifications. That's a number that we need to have for our targets. But that's something that was not tracked before, and now she's doing it. Let's see, for the goals of next year, I know she's going to focus on increased Breeze utilization. Some of the codes that we're using for probation are not, they're not as clear as they should be. We need to kind of tamper down on those a little bit. And then there hasn't been consistency with some of our probationers in using the codes every single time. And that's why, it might not reflect some of our data the way it should, because really what we want to do is to be able to just pull a report based on the data that's in the system and have that data be accurate. But obviously with all the turnover, there hasn't been consistency with applying those codes because there's just been a lack of time to work. Ginger's, I know she's mentioned that she wants to continue cleaning up the probation files, really have a firm understanding of every probationer, complete the complaint investigations. So we do receive obviously several complaints. I think we've got about 70 against our probationers right now. So she, as the probation monitor, should be involved in the investigation of her probationer because when it goes to the AG's office, if it does, she's going to be called as the witness. She's the probation monitor. It's it only makes sense. Continuing to monitor the biological fluid testing program. Obviously, that's a key piece, and it's a really big piece of probation, and in general takes a lot of time. And then pursuing action against the probation violation. So being timely if somebody has missed, a payment, a quarterly report, a test, to be able to respond to that timely and then take appropriate action based on what the response is or what we have just in total. So I think that's it. If you had any questions for Ginger.
Okay, thank you. And kudos, Ginger and Rob, too, for I'm really impressed with what you're doing. I had one question, and then I think we'll go to Mark. Did I just hear you say that we have had 70 complaints and we have a total of 90 against probationers, and there's 96 total? So are there multiple complaints against a few probationers? Is that what that looks
Correct.
like?
Yes, ma'am.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, good. Mark, and then Kathy.
Trust me, I know what it's like to have an incredible amount of work to do and seemingly not enough resources to get it done, especially when you care passionately about that work. So,
Right.
both of you, especially you, Ginger, thank you so much for the work that you do. And finally, I was wondering if Ginger has found any new recent fountain pens to add to her collection. Anything that just I've told so many people that I know someone like fountain pens. I think that's
Yes, doctor, I have this Namiki. It's a beautiful pen. This is my favorite pen right now.
How many do you have?
I don't have that many, maybe 12.
Well, keep on collecting.
Thank you, doctor. I shall do that.
Okay, Kathy's hands up.
Hi, guys, and Ginger, thank you, and Rob. Just again wanted to commend you on how hard you're working and how much you're working. And I think one thing that I've seen that shows how efficient you are and how responsive you are is in any of the materials we're getting for hearings or disciplinary matters, when the probation reports are very complete. The back and forth, your responsiveness, I've noticed that it's better than we have seen in the past, and very helpful for us as members looking at this. So I really want to thank you, given how few hours there are in a day, and there's only one of you. One thing on the question, I know we want the OT and another probation monitor. Generally for Jessica or Rob or Ginger, what's the likelihood and what's the timetable on being able to actually get that done, approved, right? That's the first hurdle.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Okay, Jessica, you're on.
Yeah. So it is going to be an even bigger hurdle to get any kind of positions because of COVID and the immediate cost savings that we have to do per the executive order. But they are still approving mission critical positions. And so it's our intent to push this forward because we do feel like it is mission critical. So if this happens, then it wouldn't be until next fiscal year that we would be able to get a position. However, because we are recognizing some significant cost savings in the enforcement program, specifically with DFI, with some of the AG costs, and then just cost savings overall at the board, we are looking at being able to fill those positions out of our blanket, which means the money that we have left over for this last fiscal year was around $500,000. If we're able to build it into our budget to where if we were in the same predicament the next fiscal year that we were projected to have $500,000 of savings, then we would be able to use that money to pay for additional staffing sooner. So we're exploring all of our options in order to get those positions as quickly as possible.
Okay, because I just see for public protection, which is our mission, the adequate management of probationers, allowing them to continue practicing but managing and review and watching it is critical for public protection. So it just seems like, I know there's budget constraints now, obviously, with everything else going on, but this seems to be very critical for us to be able to get anything we can do to help. Let us know.
Okay, thank you.
Christina, you have your hand up?
I'll make it quick. I just wanted to say thank you to both of you. You guys are obviously doing a fantastic job, and it feels like everything is starting to kind of come together, and maybe there is a little bit of faint light down the tunnel. But it's really great job, and I know it doesn't look good on paper, but it does show what you're doing. And thank you, Ginger. You've been you really are like going way above and beyond what we've seen in the past, and it is really helpful. So thanks to both of you. And thanks, Rob.
Sure Rob oversold me a little bit, but
She's so
I
modest.
appreciate the kudos. I really do.
She's so modest.
So I'm going to go ahead and ask the moderator to please open this up for any public comment on the last couple of reports.
Per the direction of the board, the Q&A panel has been opened. If you would like to submit a public comment, please type "I would like to make a public comment" and submit to all panelists. I will pause a moment to allow people access and submission. No comments have been submitted. Would you like me to close this feature?
Yes, please and thank you. So it's now 5:41, and so I'm going to go ahead and make an executive decision to take items F and G and also of 14 on the agenda, and then item 15 on the agenda, and we're going to go ahead and turf those till tomorrow. Unfortunately, I don't know exactly what time those will happen. Do we need to set a time for those, Jessica?
No, but just know, members, we have to do the petitions right at 9 o'clock, and then the 2 closed session items that you guys have. So it's really difficult to make any kind of estimate of when that will be.
Okay, so we will definitely open it up, though, back to the public after our closed session, and we will take up where we left off. Okay, having said that, are we good to close this session?
Tara, I think, wanted to say something.
Oh, Tara.
Real
okay.
quick, sometimes with your petition hearings, we've had some delays with court reporters and people trying to log on. So it may be possible to cover 1 or 2 of these items that we're having to push over tomorrow morning. I'm just throwing that out there in case that's a possibility. That's all. Thank you.
Well, we will be in open session then, right? Because we have to open in the morning. So if we can, we'll take up with item F, 14F. Okay, so I'd like to adjourn the meeting, and we'll see you tomorrow morning, 9 a.m.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.